Push the button, Frank.
Right.
All right.
We're live.
We're live. Well, I have to say, I'm probably going to spend a good amount of time, and this is going to mean nothing to the folks in the podcast listening. I'm going to be spending a lot of time watching the YouTube feed because I've been sitting here as we were warming up and getting ready to go live, looking at the live chat over here on the StreamYard side, which is normally, right there. But the lag has got to be 2 minutes easily.
I don't.
So,
Is it?
yeah, somebody will post something in the live chat over on YouTube, and I won't see it for 2 minutes.
See, I wouldn't even mention that, so people are oblivious.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick over here, and you'll see in my glasses that I flicked over here. And well, I don't want to mess with anybody's head, but now I'm over here on the YouTube channel, and I can see the comments as they come in. But folks on the podcast don't care about that. Hey, y'all out there in the chat, how y'all doing? I don't know if you could tell by the thumbnail for the album art, but we have tried an experiment this time. We haven't scripted anything, but we did talk about something behind the scenes because I had a question for Eloy. We talk about music a lot on this podcast, as everybody knows. And we talk about, the music of today and the music of yesterday and this, that, and the other. And I finally came up and hit him up with a question. I said, all right, if you were going to try to introduce somebody younger than you to the music you grew up with, what you consider your music, what songs or what albums would you play for them to kind of demonstrate this is the stuff that I grew up with?
Yeah.
And so I talked to him about it last week, and then I mentioned something about it again yesterday, and we have both kind of sort of come up with, I'm guessing you've come up with a few tunes or a few albums or something.
Let me just say this. And by the way, hello to Jim Dockrell, Steve Harneal is his official name. You do it. What's going on? We also have Frankie CNC. Frankie, how's it going? Who else we got out there?
Oh, I'm sure we've got another one.
We've got the Mad Hatter out there as well. Hello, Mad Hatter.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck Norris is not here because if he were, he would destroy the podcast and the universe that surrounds it. I just wanted to say, Mark, that I did think of it, but I took a siesta, Mark.
Uh-oh.
And upon taking said siesta, I felt this wave of something come over me that was peaceful but urgent at the same time. And I got up and then peed.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you went and hit the Publix for some more clam chowder.
No, but I'm kind of in a plane, a sort of a frequency, a station tuned to letting it all go. So I'm going to be as forthcoming with my answers, but it might be shocking in some respect, or not shocking, but I might divert, and you can always reel me in.
Okay. Well, no worries, because I never wanted this to be something that you had to study for. You know the music you like. And this kind of may or may not dovetail in with our 5 favorite albums that we did a couple years ago or a year ago.
Good.
But I figure you know the music you like. Yeah. And because I can think of 3 or 4 songs or 3 or 4 albums that kind of epitomizes the music that I grew up with. They're not necessarily my favorites, but it's something that if I play it, I can put it on and say, this is what we used to rock to.
So the idea here is if we had someone brand spanking new in front of us, and we wanted to impress on them the music that inspired, that sparked, that we felt connected to back when, what music, what albums would this be?
Yeah, what album, what song?
To make them
You know,
go, Eureka, now I understand what you mean, and I'm
yeah.
going to delve into this. Okay, I got
Oh,
you.
whether they want to delve further or not, but something that kind of exemplifies the music that you grew up with, the songs you used to turn up on the radio when you were cruising around in the car,
Yeah.
or the album that you would grab and put on when a friend come over, or something like that, something that just epitomizes the sound of the era, you know.
Yes. So so are you just saying for me to tell you
Well,
something, or
if you want, I'll start.
okay? Because I'll just say this, and then you tell me.
Okay.
To me, when you said that, and today the way I'm sort of the mood I'm in and stuff,
Mhm.
to me, I would reach in to one of these plastic containers that I have that's foggy yet transparent, kind of sort of,
Mhm.
with a blue snap on top, and I would pull out. It's full of cassettes and all sorts of stuff,
Mhm.
and I'd pull out a mixtape that I mixed in the 80s that I still have there,
Oh, cool.
where I sat on my bed. It was a twin bed in my room. Mom probably in the kitchen on the phone, cigarette in the mouth, making Cuban coffee. Dad probably either out working or in the room, laying down, listening to radio or TV.
Mhm.
And I was in there with this stereo that was purchased, and I believe my aunt purchased me that stereo for Christmas. It was a tower stereo that sat in the middle of the room with two huge speaker towers, and then it had a stack on the bottom. It had a glass that you'd press, and it would open up, and you could put your records in there. So I had my records in there. The
Yeah.
next level, I believe, had the cassette deck, and it had
Right.
one for listening and the other one for
For
recording
recording. Yeah.
from one to the other. On top of that, it had a huge equalizer with a bunch of little equalizer stuff in it. I'd always mess with those. But in general, I remember wanting to, in certain stages, lift the bass and lower and I played with those, but typically I'd leave them sound. And then on the top of that was the radio dialer.
Mhm.
And then on top of that was the actual turntable, and with a transparent lid that you'd close or
Right.
pull open and whatnot.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I'd sit there with the radio playing, and I ran into the oldies station, and I recorded all sorts of stuff and created this cassette with everything from the Beatles. And by the way, I did not know that they were the Beatles. I did not know that I didn't know who all these people were, but I
Mhm.
recorded them because I liked them. And I
Yeah.
spent a day going through, and I still have that cassette. And
Right.
it's got the Everly Brothers, it's got the Beatles, and that would probably be a big representation to show to a kid,
Uh-huh.
um, you know,
Yeah.
what's what.
Okay. Okay. So just that one mixtape, and which is a little bit of everything, but a lot of oldies.
It's got the Everly Brothers
Mhm.
with the classic song. I forget the name of it now. Oh my love, my darling.
Unchained Melody.
It's got Unchained Melody. It's got a song that goes, I really think you're groovy. Let's go out to a movie. I really
Oh my
like you,
gosh.
Eleanor. Will we? Eleanor.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the Turtles. I didn't know that they were then. And I've got what's that song from the Kinks that's really weird? The taxman's taking all my art.
Oh,
He's left
Sunny Afternoon
lazy on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, and
Mhm.
Let It Be, and a
in
bunch
the
of songs.
summertime. And by
So
the way, Unchained Melody was the Righteous Brothers, but that's okay.
did I say Everly Brothers?
Yeah, but that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. I think they did a cover of it though.
I don't know.
They might have.
I don't
Maybe
know.
somebody can check it and see, but it was the Righteous Brothers, the one that
Okay.
I recorded. But I'm just trying to save face here.
Yeah.
Okay. So it had a bunch of that stuff. And to me, and I didn't know who they were until I started really finding out. And then it was like, wow, you know.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's real interesting because you were born in the 70s and you went back to the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
But that was your style of music. That's cool. See, now I'm in the 60s and 70s. And for those over here on YouTube, I mean, Jim Dockerell's been going down and he's been listening to a bunch of stuff over here off to the side. And it's funny, the first album that he listed, Bad Company by Bad Company,
It was a great album.
is a very good album. But the first song that came to my mind when I thought of this was what song kind of sets the tone and sets the mood for late 60s, early 70s, well, up into the mid and late 70s, as a matter of fact. And it was Rock and Roll Fantasy by Bad Company. So that would probably be the first tune I played for somebody to kind of show them the groove that I was into at the time.
Very cool.
Rock and Roll Fantasy, I think, is probably one of the better tunes that they made. I mean, they made a lot of good ones, don't get me wrong, you know. But so Bad Company's Rock and Roll Fantasy, and then I have to default back to the Woodstock soundtrack. And then just kind of get into all of Woodstock, what it was, what it meant, who went, who didn't, you know, that kind of thing. And just rehash that old thing. But I think that those really epitomize, you know, and then there's maybe some video of Jimi Hendrix playing Monterey Pop and Janis Joplin singing Ball and Chain at Monterey Pop, which was basically her breakout. I mean, Big Brother and the Holding Company basically broke out from there. At that festival made that group. They skyrocketed from there. But I don't know, man. It's interesting that you went back that far because I really honestly thought that you would get more into the metal of the day.
Well, I would start because what you posed, this isn't a quick, you know.
No, it's not.
It's not like, okay, little Joey, that's now go. It's like, okay, little Joey, we've only just begun.
Oh, not them.
You know, well, no, but see, yes, them in this case, because that's really the lyric matches. You know, the thing is that's just a because look, the self-discovery without knowing any for me, here's the problem. I don't see music as disposable.
True that.
Here's my problem. I see music as a literal snapshot in time that states the actual song. It has the or the lyrical content. It has the musical language that's going on, and it also has context for the individuals creating that and their story. To me, it's like writing a novel in a small, compact, you know, it's an art form that is like a little novel, encapsulated, like a little, remember Star Trek? They put the little tape into the machine and it would read, the computer will, certain information. To me, it's like a little time capsule with a lot of stored information, and they have value. It's the most powerful thing in the world. So I look at it in reference to that. Boy, I don't know why I said that, but there was a reason I was saying that. Huh.
I don't know.
Well, in any event, that they're very special little moment. It's not disposable, I think I said.
Right. Yes.
And so the meaning of discovery to me is a way of thinking. And because of music, I was able to deflect a lot of teenage rage, teenage angst. I think we all went through that. But music helped, and but for me, it became. I wanted to know about the musicians. I wanted to know about everything. Right. I wanted the story. So it became sort of like I don't want to say lifestyle because it wasn't a lifestyle, but it identified um, one's culture as a
Yeah.
first time I began to think independently, because people in the songs, mind you, I never went stabbing people with a rubber dragon head on with a pentagram on my, but it sort, you know, when John Lennon would say a lyric and you're listening to it, you're like, oh, see, it's also philosophy, because people steal, musicians are stealing. Bono, which I don't like, he's just such a mess, but they had some great albums early on. He said every artist is, no, how is it? Every poet is a thief. No, every artist is a cannibal. Every poet is a thief. I'll sing about their inspiration, or I'll kill their inspiration and sing about their grief, some sort of thing like that. So people steal into their music the culture, like it sucks in philosophies, and they rewrite them in little word phrases. So people are getting third to fourth to fifth generation wisdom through a song, and the
Right.
meaning is a cult, you know, it's sort of like watered down, but the meaning still exists there, and one starts to process it. Then you pick up a philosophy book as a kid and you're reading it because you're some crazy, you'd like to explore.
Well, yeah, because we all did that. No, go ahead.
Well, you read it and then you connect that, oh crap, John Lennon said that, but he didn't mean, it's freaking Aristotle. So he took it from this guy, and stuff like that. And then so it becomes this whole world.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I am with you. And the snarky, it wasn't a snarky remark, but the crack about, you know, the last thing on my mind at that age was philosophers. Believe me, I was just da 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 dum. Holy shit, what was that? Or I can't say that. Holy hell, what was that? I think I can say that.
Yeah.
And so wait, stop. Time out. The Bay City Rollers, Jim Dockrell, out, get out. If you were a fan of the Bay City Rollers, you can't listen to us.
You see, but you see, here's the funny thing about Mark is actually, so we are carbon copies with the same thing. So during his time, there was off limit music that was totally not acceptable. And the same thing happened with me in my time. And because like your buddies would say, right? Like if they saw somebody with, you know, a certain type of t-shirt or something, whatever, they'd be like, dude, what the heck's wrong with you? You're like totally not cool. What's right? You know, and there was a lot of that throughout history. And that's part of rock and roll too. That's part of the whole thing, dude.
It is.
Which makes it awesome.
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
What your
when you start buying Ted Nugent and Dire Straits album, I will believe you're sincere.
No. What I mean, no, I agree with you as far as but part of the rock and roll is like you have groupings of people that prefer a certain style, and when they see another one, they're like, dude, that's totally, you know what, you know,
exactly.
Yeah, so that's part of the rock. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that.
Okay, well, yeah, it is all part of quote unquote rock and roll.
Yeah,
but you know, we've had this discussion before about the stuff that's targeted to 12-year-old girls and the stuff that real people listen to. So, but yeah, it's and I just had to pick on Jim because he picks on everybody. So that was my way of acknowledging he was there. But yeah, I'm with you to a point, but I don't think at that age I was putting that much of a deep meaning into it. It was simply stuff that I like. Now you come at this from a different angle because you are a musician.
Well, I wasn't back then.
No, but you weren't back then. Okay,
no, I'm talking about I was a little. I was a little kid listening to. I was involved in exploring the rock and roll as a little kid. I'd go over to play with my friends, and I remember one day walking into their big brother's room, and it was like walking into this other world. I opened the door, and it was just a regular, like if you were to go into that room now, it's a little nothing room in size,
Mhm.
but for a little kid, I was much smaller, so it was a much bigger room as a kid. But you walk in,
Uh-huh.
and every single inch of that place was covered. And these are kids that were probably 18 years old back then, probably your age, from your time, or maybe a little bit somewhere within where you're at, or where Steve is at, where you guys are at.
Mhm.
So you guys would have been the older brothers that us would look up and say, like, holy crap, man, these people are like totally, they have girlfriends, they have this, how cool. And we
Yeah.
were like the little brothers and whatnot. So I walked in, and every inch of this guy's room was covered in rock and roll posters, magazine cutting, every inch, walls, roof, the whole room was like a dungeon layer of rock.
Yeah.
And I was like blown away. Whereas in my house, everything was a very neatly quaint, kind of like a snapshot of. I have a lot of photos. Everything is well placed. My mom kept things. So there's no. My room was Mickey Mouse and all these things. That changed.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
had this whole TV perception, and then Ozzy Osbourne.
Mhm.
Yeah, as simple. And Ozzy's not the most philosophical guy in the
No,
world.
no.
But there was the introduction of the darkness.
You went to the horror genre.
Yeah, and the mystery and the darkness and dragons and such. And that is the 80s contemporary music within the metal. And when I started seeing that, then they would loan me a cassette tape,
Mhm.
and I'd take it home and consume it.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then I started purchasing when because I'd have some money, maybe a grandparent would leave you some. I'd go to the store and purchase. I remember buying Quiet Riot at the supermarket. It was sitting there for years. Nobody in Sweetwater wanted that Quiet Riot cassette, and you'd go and people would buy cigarettes. They'd buy this, that. No, nobody. It was sitting there for years. And one day I walked in. I'm sure the lady thought, "Wow, it finally sold," because it was just sitting there, same darn cassette for years. And I bought it, took it home with me.
Old Yellow and everything. Yeah, I that kind of hit me that I was getting older when they started finding some pretty good music in the bargain bin. I was like, hey, wait a minute, that's Clapton, man. Let me have that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess it kind of went the same way for me because there was always music in the car when we were going someplace, and we were always going someplace. It seemed at home it was TV, so I'm watching Gilligan's Island and the Beverly Hillbillies when they came out, and but whenever we went anywhere, Dad was in control of the radio, so the music was always there. And I grew up on Chubby Checker. I grew up on the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and Danny and the Juniors and Del Shannon and Bill Haley and the Comets. I grew up on all of that stuff. And then Mom and Dad's taste kind of split off. She got more into the Nat King Cole, Andy Williams, the Carpenters, that kind of thing. For her, somebody like Jim Croce or Mac Davis was pretty wild, unless they were singing a ballad. Then she was fine with it.
Yeah.
But something like Rapid Roy, the Stock Car Boy, that was pretty wild for her taste.
That was pretty awesome. That song is a pretty bad to the bone song.
Oh yeah.
Rapid Roy, that Stock Car Boy.
Yep. Oh, I loved Jim Croce's songwriting. He was, take something as cool as Alabama Rain, which was an excellent tune, a nice love song, a nice ballad, and then spin around and do something like Working at the Car Wash Blues, or You Don't Mess Around with Jim. I mean, the guy's range was excellent. That was probably, see, I never had Croce's first album, Life and Times. My brother got it for Christmas, and I poached it from him I don't know how many times until I got a cassette deck and recorded it. But that was kind of in one of my transitional phases too. So I'm like 11 years old, but I had my own stuff, going too. But then I heard that and kind of, wait a minute, acoustic isn't all that bad, because by that time I'm listening to the Kinks and I'm listening to the Beatles, and I'm listening to, so we're looking at, early 70s. And so I did have that kind of transitional phase too, where I kind of went away from my father's music, which was what was played basically in the house whenever he turned on the stereo and what he was playing in the car, to my own music. And when Dad would change the channel when Led Zeppelin came on, that became something I needed to look for. Why did he not like that? I liked that. And so I bought their second album first, then went back and got their first album after I wore the first one or the second one out. So I kind of went at it backwards a little bit. But I would say the first 4 Led Zeppelin albums would be good representations of the stuff that I grew up on when I started developing my own musical tastes.
That's some heavy stuff.
It is. But again, as you said, it's not disposable music. 99% of it aged well. It's just as relevant today as it was back then. There's a few things, going to California isn't really as relevant now as it was back then.
See, but let me just interject with this about that. I get that and I agree. But to me, it's all just the same, because what it is again like a photograph.
It is exactly a snapshot in time, and that's what I mean when I say it doesn't really translate well, because it's not as relatable now as it was back then. But you take something like, well, heck, Black Dog or Livin' Lovin' Maid, that does translate to now. Because everybody has thought that or felt like that at one time or another all through life,
Well, so I'll just backtrack to compare a few things that you said, because you mentioned driving in the car and your dad and the stereo and the parting of different tastes and stuff as time, as new styles started to. So it's a funny situation. I have a fun, another thing I'll just say, I hate to deviate and then deviate from the deviation, but it's what I'm doing.
Oh, that's cool.
I do want to state this, because we're all, this is our personal little nook in the cafe, sipping coffee, and talking, very intimate and personal. I will say, as far as, so remember that my folks were not born here. And my folks came from Cuba at a very young age. So my father, if I remember back, his only musical references was Bill Haley and the Comets, Elvis Presley. He always talked about the 50s.
Right.
Because he was born in the 40s, but came up, in the 50s. So his references were, he did not, by any stretch of the imagination, enjoy, that I can remember, listen to, enjoy 60s music. To him, that was probably insane music, like totally not. He was more into the older style,
Right.
But in the car, he would never. And by the way, the reason I interjected the whole thing that they came here is that Cubans are a percentile of a percentile of a percentile of the whole population in the United States.
Right.
It's such a minute minority that their own eccentricities are. I have dip in my mouth, and that tongue just keeps rolling. Are unique, are sort of like, it's a weird thing. It's placed in a situation where it's not a mainstream. So on the radio was always the news,
right?
And it was always about the whole communistic Caribbean, the Kennedy, the this and that, the Cuban. It was always that. And 20 years out from that, they were still talking about that on the darn radio in Miami, on many stations, and people would be interviewed. So we'd be listening to. I'm a little kid sitting, everybody else is listening. So I was surprised when I go with my friends. Hey, mom, they're going to McDonald's. Can I go with them? And we go. And in their car, they didn't put on that station. They'd put on regular, like, current music. And I was like, oh, well, hell, this is cool.
You mean radios do that too?
Yeah. So I just want to say, so in my father's record collection, and I remember this, were actual records of, like, news. Like, sort of like, it was always informational. And then you'd have some, like, you'd see a Spanish lady in a flamenco suit. I remember one, or a close-up with those faded green covers and all that. And I'd see a couple of those, but he never played that. It was always constant information was the entertainment.
Yeah.
And so when my friends and I started hanging out with them, and I saw this Ozzy Osbourne, boy, that was refreshing, because what kid really wants all that information?
Well, and that's kind of sort of the way I was when, I started hearing things like Led Zeppelin on the radio, and Dad would hit it. Because again, it was AM top 40. So, something by the Guess Who would come on, then something by the Cowsills would come on, then Led Zeppelin came on, which my mother despised. She hated Robert Plant's voice until he hooked up with the Honey Drippers and did Sea of Love. She liked that song from back in the day, and she liked the way he sang it. And I think I kind of saw her cringe when I told her who it was singing it. You remember that Led Zeppelin group, Whole Lot of Love? Yes, that's the same singer. No way. And I finally had to show her the album cover, and she didn't. She believed me after that. But I know she cringed inside because she despised Led Zeppelin. But that just made me wanted to listen to it more.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was kind of the start of the rebellion and kind of the pushback, because no, this is mine. You can have Andy Williams. You can have Johnny Mathis. This is mine.
Let me just say this about Robert Plant. It is completely true that he is unconventional.
Oh yeah.
In his singing style, and that might, rub people the wrong way. However, his style is so incredibly unique and
varied.
The thing about Robert Plant is that throughout his career, and the way he voiced those songs with Zeppelin was so unique on its. Not only was the music outrageously out there and awesome, but his style, he was the perfect blend, because he didn't control. You can't put your finger on Robert Plant's vocal.
No, you can't, because you take something like Going to California, which is nice and soft and gentle, and the one that drove my mother up a tree and would send her into a blind rage was the Immigrant Song, which made it one of my favorites. That opening, I can't hit those notes. I'm not even going to try it. The minute he went into that, I mean, that woman was, she went into, Warp Factor 12. Headphones or shut it off. All right.
Is that the one? Yeah. This is the land of the ice and snow, where the wind and the wind won't blow.
That's the one. Exactly. Her big thing was, I don't want to be screamed at, and to her, that's what it was.
But she has a look. Actually, she had a point. If you think about it, he is screaming for people from back then. He's screaming at them. My dad would not have appreciated that. My mom would not have appreciated that. Although she was totally into the 50s music too. She had Paul Anka,
right,
all throughout her life. I mean, that was the stuff that they enjoyed. They enjoyed. Well, my dad, because of the era, but my dad really didn't listen to. I never heard him kick back with a album of music.
Well, some people just weren't into it. I mean, years later, after a certain point, my father got out of music altogether too, and he became a talk radio junkie himself.
Yeah.
It happens to some people. I still like to get on. It's odd. I've got on my iTunes on my old computer in the other room, I've got well over 2,000 songs. And I looked at it one day and it's like 6 days of music, 6 days to listen to it. If I started at the first song, got to the end, it would be like 6 days.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't even put iTunes on this computer because it's a different age. I can get on YouTube if I want to listen to Tainted Love by Soft Cell. I can just go to YouTube and look it up, and there it is. But what I'm having fun doing now, and what made me think of this, is you can't swing anything on YouTube without running into somebody, a reaction channel of some kind.
Yeah.
And the number of young people who are finding this music that we grew up on and listening to it for the first time and going, dang, how did I not ever hear this? And you can see it in their eyes. They've heard certain little bits and pieces of some things, like one of the reactors, they were playing Stevie Ray Vaughan's cover of Voodoo Child. And the guy, he started playing, and the guy said, the Hulk Hogan song? That's Voodoo Child? He had no idea what the song was called. He had heard that part of it when Hulk Hogan was, coming out for WWE, at that time WWF.
Mm-hmm.
You have other guys who, wait a minute, I remember this from what was that game? Rockstar? I don't remember.
Rockstar.
Rock Band.
Rock Band.
Yeah, I remember this from Rock Band. They had no idea who played it. They had no idea. They never heard the whole song with just in the context of that game. And just, it's a lot of fun to me to watch these people discovering old stuff. And you go through the comments, how could you have not heard this? This has been on the radio since 1972. It's like, yeah, but when you're brought up listening to nothing but gospel, or you're brought up listening to nothing but classical, you miss a lot, So yeah. I fall down that rabbit hole real easy.
Well, listen, there's another thing. Back then, so even before MTV, no, let me say that again. Even as MTV was active and all that, not everybody had cable.
Right.
Not everybody could afford an album a week.
Right.
So there was a limited exposure. You had the radio, which is the main thing, and then and then they would say, and the artist was, or here's another one by T-Rex, because I just saw Doc Roll say T-Rex, which, by the way, was an awesome band.
Yep.
I just awesome band. So they didn't have the ability to branch out like we can. I could be right now here sitting with you, and in just half a moment, I could be watching a video of, like, I don't know, people playing hurdy-gurdy, instruments, or medieval whatever, or Indian, whatever.
It's funny you mention that, because there is a girl who plays the hurdy-gurdy. She's over in Europe somewhere, and she does covers of metal tunes on a hurdy-gurdy.
That's cool.
And for those of you who don't know what a hurdy-gurdy is, it's a stringed instrument that kind of looks like a lap steel guitar, but very short. And it kind of sort of sounds like a violin, except it doesn't have a bow. It has a crank on it and there's a wheel that rubs against the bottom of the strings and makes a violinish sound. And it has frets on it, and you fret it like you would a guitar while you're turning this crank.
Yeah.
And they actually sound pretty cool. You can find all kinds of wild stuff if you look for it on YouTube. But it excites me to see younger people discovering the stuff that I got into, because some of these people are, 18, 19, 20, 22 years old.
Yeah.
But then again, some of them are in their 30s and 40s. And
Mhm.
it's like, how have I never heard this before? And it's just watching that discovery and watching that, that when they hear, for instance, Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas for the first time, it's like, holy cow, listen to these guys. Or 25 or 6 to 4 by Chicago Transit Authority, back when they were
Yeah.
rock and roll and not easy listening.
Well, they were pretty wild actually back then.
They were very wild.
I mean, trumpets and all sorts of they were awesome.
Mhm.
They were so and by the
And
way, I don't mean to go down and I know you're I appreciate Chicago throughout all seasons because to be frank with you, I knew about the only reason I could even go back to Chicago is because I listened to Chicago of the 80s, which is not favored by many people, but I love the sound of Chicago in the 80s and going back massively awesome. So I'm partial to all of Chicago's music.
yeah, that was with God. I'm really trying to think of Terry Kath. I could not think of his name to save my soul. Terry Kath on the lead guitar with all of the horn section behind him. That was a killer combination.
Yeah.
It really was. When they got into, and Peter Cetera was a heck of a vocalist, always was.
Yeah.
But after Terry's death, they kind of went the other direction. It's kind of like the Doobie Brothers did the same thing when they were under Tom Johnston. They were raw, they were guitar based, and then Michael McDonald came along, and Tom Johnson bowed out because due to health reasons, and Michael McDonald came along, and they became more keyboard based and turned into 80s pap.
Journey did the same thing. They were actually quite a bit more rock and roll in their earlier albums.
Yeah.
Before what's this guy's name came
Steve
in?
Perry.
Yeah. But he rescued the band from sliding because they weren't getting any traction. So
Right.
they went in that direction. So I mean,
yeah, and he was one heck of a vocalist, but he just got really disillusioned by the music industry, didn't like the music industry anymore, and didn't want to sing anymore, and just quit. He just quit, but I'm glad he's back.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was very happy to see. I mean,
He's one hell of a vocalist. The guy's range, his power. I mean, he is one hell of a vocalist.
do you know who his inspiration is?
Hmm.
You'll never guess.
Paul McCartney.
Nope.
Okay.
Sam Cooke.
Really?
Nope.
Sam Cooke had a set of pipes too.
And if you listen to him, you could tell that it's influenced by Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke could actually sing Journey songs. Sam Cooke was an amazing vocalist.
Yeah, Sam Cooke. I mean, Steve Perry has quite a bit of soul to his voice, but I wouldn't have made the connection with Sam Cooke.
I only did because he's actually offered that in interviews. And after that, and by the way, I used to go back and buy. There's so much. I used to go buy like Sam Cooke, the best of, and such.
Right.
And what an amazing. I mean, just there's so much good music out there, but most kids, I don't believe, were making the choices I was making musically at the time.
Well, I wasn't either, because we're looking at 75, 76, 77 as disco starts to come in. And my friends up and down the street were wanting to listen to the disco stuff, and I just wasn't into it. I was buying Beatles records. I was buying albums by the Guess Who. I was listening to Maynard Ferguson, the jazz trumpeter. I was listening to, oh my gosh, just stuff that they weren't listening to because I didn't like the style. I didn't want to listen to Pablo Cruz. I didn't want to listen to Donna Summer. I didn't want to listen to, pick whoever it was at the time, Leo Sayer. I didn't want to listen to them. I wanted to listen to Santana, or something of the older genre, some more Led Zeppelin or some Pink Floyd or something like that. Sam and Dave, Otis Redding, give me some of that stuff.
There's so many things that were that we can easily miss, and we do, about the era or the eras that we're talking about. There were so many things. So kids then, and I've told you this a bunch of times,
Mm-hmm.
they would grab a record. I remember one specific incident, but there were many, and we would all huddle around
Mm-hmm.
outside with a small stereo boombox or wherever, and they press play on the record, and we'd all huddle around. And I was smaller than these older ones, and I'd look at them like you're hanging, and you'd see them with their hand on their chin and their eyes squinting and like nodding their head, listening to the lyrics and like inspecting the song, looking for meaning, as if there was a wise man in there ready to preach some sort of fabled, forgotten truth. And I took note of all that. That's probably what screwed my stuff up. Because I took note of a bunch of stuff that maybe other people passed up, and I took certain things to heart, and I attached value to certain things, and it got me to where I am now.
Well, I've always listened to lyric like that because, mainly due to my mother, put the headphones on or shut it off. I fell in love with headphones from an early age, and you pick up so much more.
You do
with headphones on.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to not listen to the lyric when you're sitting back in a, nice overstuffed chair that I would shove up against the front of the stereo, because I didn't have an extension cord for the headphones and I had to plug it in right there. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting back, and there's no lights on in the room, and you're just listening to Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. You're going to pick up on the lyrics, especially if you've listened to it over and over and over again. And that's just where that part of it came from. And so, searching for alternate meanings, I was still enough of just a pedestrian listener that I didn't try to add my own meanings to it. If I wanted to know what the song meant, I would look for information on the song, whether it be in the liner notes of the album or maybe newspaper articles or Rolling Stone magazine when it started up, where you had interviews with the performers. And sometimes they'd give away a meaning to a song, sometimes they wouldn't. Like I mentioned 25 or 6 to 4. Mm-hmm. Terry Kath wrote that song, and if you listen to the lyrics, what it's about is he's got writer's block. He's trying to write a ding-dong song, and he can't. He's full of caffeine. He's trying to get to sleep. He can't sleep. He can't write. He doesn't know what to do. 25 or 6 to 4 is the time. It's either 25, 26 to 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I can't sleep. I can't dance. I can't write. I can't do nothing. So it's a song of frustration. But when you put it all together, it just works,
So I'll give you the albums that I would give to the kid, although we mentioned what we mentioned before.
Okay.
And these are separate from that one episode we did when we named our top album. Right. This is in the context of what we've been talking about, and my selfish wanting to impart this to that kid. So I would hand to them, here, sir, young man, here is Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon. Not because I say this to you, I wouldn't say it to the kid, not because there's brilliance and this and that, but because on the cover, Ozzy is dressed as a wolf with the moon, and his name has this very evil yellow and red to it. And in the album, there's a bunch of rock and roll that may not necessarily be the most clever. There's awesomeness in there, but it's something that I. So here you go, Bark at the Moon, and there's good songs in there. Bark at the Moon. I'd also hand him. Let's see what I'd say. So Bark at the Moon. I'd hand him The Great Radio Controversy by Tesla, that album. There's a song there that says, love is all around you. Love is knocking. Very simple lyrics. Open the door. But it's an acoustic. Well, the whole album is full of hard rock, and then it has this acoustic thing. And it's a classic 80s album that's maybe not known to many people nowadays, but I'd hand him that by Tesla. Bad to the Bone. They could take that with them. I'd hand them Girls, Girls, Girls by Motley Crue, just because the cover of that. So that's what impacted me. My buddy had all these cassettes one day in junior high, and I saw Motley Crue. I'd never owned a Motley Crue album, and he loaned it to me. And on the cover is Motley Crue dressed in leather, just dark leather and freaking bad. And I just because it's raw, I'd hand that kid that. I'd hand that kid another Aussie, but this one it's Black Sabbath, and I'd say be careful with this one, son. And
which album? Which album?
Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath.
Okay.
I'd hand him that right away, which is, by the way, start to finish, a beautifully put together, total awesomeness album. I'd hand him that. Then I'd hand him Van Halen 2. Okay, that album. It's got like a blue cover. It's a very plain cover. Van Halen 2. I'd hand him that album. Go off with this, young one, and come back to me later. And then a couple of other ones I'd hand to him. I'd hand to him Anthraxy. There's a lot of Anthrax, so it's very difficult. But I would hand him, which came later, State of Euphoria by Anthrax, which is heavy metal to the max. Boom, go off with that one as well. And then I'd hand him, well, I'd have to say, I love all their albums, but I spent a lot of time with And Justice for All, which happened a little bit later in their career. So I would hand them Metallica's And Justice for All. I'd say, come back to me in a couple of hours. I have more for you.
Okay. See, now your list of albums is more time specific. So yeah. All right. Well, then I'll back off of what I said earlier.
Well, no,
starting with the earlier stuff, because that did surprise me. But now seeing the albums that you picked out,
well, I want to put him in the mindset of a kid in the 80s then.
Yeah.
And so that's what I offered, and I missed a lot of stuff, but if this could become a 5-part series, because there's a lot.
Oh yeah. And it's funny because I had a backup topic that we won't get to. Maybe we'll talk about it another day, just in case this didn't go anywhere. And it looks like it's going strong. Yeah. I would start off with one song being Rock and Roll Fantasy.
Okay.
From Bad Company. And I would end it with Woodstock to explain the generation. And then along the way, it would be Black Sabbath, Paranoid. Here's the Birth of Metal. Then it would be something about Jim Croce's Life and Times. Here's the folkier side with a little bit of fun added to it. Then here is a little bit of the first 4 Zeppelin albums, because there's a range, as we talked about, in Plant's voice and a difference in all of the tunes to where you're picking up the slower side, the softer side, then the harder, the grittier side. This is hard rock. This is not metal. This is hard rock. Then it would go to Moody Blues, Days of Future Past. This is part of the evolution of progressive rock. Then, of course, Sgt. Pepper, Abbey Road, and Pet Sounds. And it's like, take these, my son, and you'll see the evolution of rock right before your eyes. Then end it with the Woodstock soundtrack album. because you have all genres there. I mean,
Yeah.
everything is there from a little bit of doo-wop from Sha Na Na all the way up to Jimi Hendrix and as acid rock as you could get. The definition of acid rock.
Now, so interesting. I mean, so you're giving us some foundational stuff. Obviously, I shared some stuff a decade removed from the sources that you're mentioning, or
Well,
two.
sure. Because that's what you grew up on, and this is what I grew up on.
Now, so okay, so I will say this: if I had to pick a song that encapsulated,
Mhm.
and I say this right now, it could change from
Oh,
minute
always.
to minute, but a stunning song, and it's thinking of innocence and that wide-eyed looking to explore music. There's one song that was done by the Beach Boys, and it's been done twice by them recording wise, maybe more, but twice. The first one, or one of them, was done in stereo in the extreme non sort of like advanced stereo sound that the Beatles used to, extreme panning and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's preferable.
Mhm.
The more extreme panning, the better. It doesn't apply to every song, but so
Yeah.
the Beach Boys had this song called "Let Him Run Wild," the stereo version,
Okay.
and with earphones on.
Mhm.
As far as a musician or a songwriter or capturing a moment, that song for some reason has always been very important musically to me. It speaks to me on a musical level, on a songwriting level,
Mhm.
on a recording level, and I just like it because there's a openness and freeness to it, and there's a sad story to it. It's like a 2-minute song.
Mhm.
Let Him Run Wild by the Beach Boys. The I believe it's the stereo. I'd have to sit and listen to both versions again,
Yeah.
but it's impactful and it's a simple song that one would pass up as silly, probably.
There's a lot of them that people would pass up as silly and nonsensical, but when you break them down and actually listen to them, they got some meaning. I mean, did anybody ever make any sense out of Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues? Listen to it under headphones a few times, and you'll be like, "Oh, I know what he's trying to say."
You know
You
what?
know?
I with Bob Dylan, I always in that particular time period of his music, once he left the folk-ish music and he started exploring the rock, and he attached this weird sort of like mix of poetry in rapid, just that weirdness. Well, I always looked at it as you put it on, he's rambling these lyrics, and you're just allowing him to take you down this ride, and imagery is striking you in your mind,
Yep.
and he's taking you along, and by the time you're trying to figure it out, you just enjoy the ride, and the song ends, and then you move on to another crazy thing.
Yeah.
So I looked at it like that back then.
Yep.
I didn't,
Yep.
you know what I'm saying? I said it's too much.
Hmm.
So let's just enjoy that. And Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm with you. I'm with you. But and Dylan was probably one of the most inconsistent people as far as vocals was concerned. That because you could get something like "Lay Lady Lay," which he has an excellent voice in that song.
Yeah.
But then you come around and listen to "Knocking on Heaven's Door,"
Hmm.
a little less cultured, but still very good.
Hmm.
Then you get to "How Does It Feel," and he ain't even trying. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to throw this out here.
I don't know what it is with Dylan. He has a
Mhm.
two, or someone wrote a 2-volume. I owned both volumes,
Mhm.
and they're thick books like that.
Mhm.
I forget how many pages, but they're huge,
Mhm.
each volume, and it goes through every live performance
Uh-huh.
and explaining through quotes of his, and it's just savage. I wonder if I still have those books somewhere. I don't know that I do, but they suggest strongly that he was sort of like the guy that comes in to mix things up and break things up, destroy so you can rebuild. So he would never record one thing the same twice.
Right.
It was always a continual, and
Right.
it didn't matter whether you liked it or you didn't. As far as the audience,
Mhm.
that was not his concern.
Right.
Throughout his career, his concern was doing what the hell he wanted.
Exactly. With one notable exception, and that is All Along the Watchtower. He was so impressed with Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower, which he sang slower, much slower.
Yeah.
When he heard Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower, he decided right then and there, that's the way I'm going to do this song now. That's the way it should sound. And he always tried to, he couldn't obviously get the guitar licks in that Hendrix did. He never tried. He didn't try to copy Hendrix, but he always played it at that tempo or tried to, and speeded it up and tried to put more energy into it. That was the one notable exception. He always tried to kind of, it's funny, it was his song, but he tried to stay true to Jimmy's cover of it as true as he could.
Dylan has a look. I'll say this. I believe that we all have amazing stories. There are people. So look, the idea of a person being marginalized or invisible, the concept of the haves and have-nots, the haves being well worth mentioning and well worth writing about and well worth, exploring their lives. And I think that that's valid, but not more valid than everyone. I think that everyone has great life stories to tell.
Sure.
The fact that people that we are talking about have this ability to create music and whatnot, they've stamped it on the musical language level. And Dylan is a beautiful example of a story. I forget where he was born in the Midwest somewhere. I forget at this point now where. I think it was Minnesota. I think it was.
I think so.
And this guy travels, there was nothing where he lived. He's in the middle of nowhere basically. And no offense, I'm just saying as like, it wasn't like the heart of like, I don't know, New York City, but he had access to a few songs, albums, records, I'm sorry. And it took him to New York City. And there's writings, books, biographies where he takes his journey. It's such a beautiful journey. And he snagged music from others along the way. And people in New York City were totally offended. Not everybody. A lot of people loved it. But people that knew, people in the know musically, in the circles, knew that they knew that he was stealing, in their words, or nicking, or grabbing other people's music totally, but adding his own lyrics.
Right.
They were not comfortable with, and the reactions were incredible. So Dylan is an original. What he did was lyrically, he injected, because look, who put the bop in the bop, shoo wop, shoo wop.
Right. But
that is a certain, well, just to wrap up my bit, that's a certain level of lyrical. It's very raw. It's very closer to the blues world of like, here's my feelings. Dylan injected a poetry that created a lot of stuff afterwards.
Right.
That's all I'm saying, but go ahead.
Well, all I was going to say was what he did was he took simple melodies. If you listen to his music, and there's not a lot of complexity to it. So maybe it was taking from this person and that the other person, but you couldn't sit there and listen to an early Dylan tune and say, oh, well, he stole that from the Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, or he stole that from the Beatles. You can't pinpoint anything. Maybe he would take certain chord progressions, but he made it his own melody.
No, I mean, this is before he even had a record contract.
Okay.
I'm talking about before he was even discovered.
Okay. See, I didn't get that far back.
yeah, there was a whole scene going on in New York with, the coffee shops and whatnot,
Okay.
and there were important people there and poets, and they would gather in Greenwich Village and
Mhm.
such,
Yeah.
Greenwich Village. And what happened was that he would show up and do a gig or a coffee house thing,
Mhm.
and he'd be playing. He'd steal songs he heard in previous nights from people and
Uh-huh.
play them and sing other lyrics, and people would love his version, and others would hear and they say, "Hey, did you hear he took your song?" It was a big mess.
Oh, wow. No,
Of
I hadn't heard that part.
Yeah, Dylan, but he did it in such a way that people also gradually, he was, an undeniable force, just what he was
Oh,
lyrically
yeah.
down. And that's that's one of the important things about Dylan. So, I don't know how we got into Dylan, but
Well, we're talking about singers and songwriters and what have you.
I'll just say the first album I bought because it was on sale. I didn't have much
Mhm.
money, and I bought Dylan. It was live at Budokan.
Yep.
What a hot mess that album was, dude.
Yep.
The whole
You
album was a hot mess.
That was one of your top 3 most hated albums. I remember that. I
And yet
remember that well.
I consumed it because I paid for it.
Oh, yeah, you got to. It wasn't like you could take it back.
Yeah.
Well, but it's like he said, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody.
Mhm. All right.
Oh,
Well, I mean, we could keep going. I
oh, we
honestly,
definitely could keep
'cause-
going, but I'm going to keep this other subject for another episode because I think this is a good one.
all right. Well, so um, so look, I think that this topic is a wonderful topic. It's unending. We do have to, stop at some point, but not before we mention to you guys that we have a website, and it's called trampledunderfootpodcast.com. On there, you'll see a bunch of past episodes. There's a link button that says Wayback Machine, and you can catch so many awesome subjects, topics that we discuss, and it's just a great way to kick back and really be entertained. I'll tell you what, last week's topic was pretty incredible because Mark had an adventure that well, you're gonna have to listen to it, but what's that episode called? What did we name it?
It's called Things That Go Drunk in the Night.
Yeah, let's just put it this way. Mark Lindsay and Linda Lindsay were woken up, and well, Mark was woke up, and something happened to him. I can't look. I'm not going to explain it. Just go in, right. Go check
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah, don't give it away. You
Yeah.
have to listen to it. You had to be there.
Yeah.
And we should also mention that trampledunderfootpodcast.com is sponsored by Harneal Media, HARNEAL. Steve Nealon over there at Harneal Media is the webmaster to the stars. He can take care of any and all of your website needs. Check him out at harnealmedia.com. We also have a Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. And for those of you over here on the tubes with us watching Jim Dockrell organize his record collection in the chat, look for Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Thanks to our YouTube folks over there. We see you. You know who you are.
Bye-bye, guys.
Take care, y'all.